Welcome to the history section. The year 1805 really marks this pivotal moment for the Corps of Discovery. They're transitioning from what was, a river-based logistical puzzle into a true exploratory mission, and they're facing the massive barrier of the Rocky Mountains.
And the physical labor just to get there, up the Missouri, was already immense. But then they hit the Great Falls.
Right. And that's not just another obstacle. This is a complex, high-stakes engineering problem they have to solve on the spot.
It completely redefined the expedition. This was in June 1805, and the discovery by Captain Lewis. It wasn't just a large waterfall, which they sort of expected. No. It was a cascading system. We're talking 5 major falls, all connected by these severe cataracts.
No, the river is just completely impassable.
Utterly. It forces an immediate overland solution, so Captain Clark gets tasked with surveying and staking out the best route to carry everything.
And his estimate was what, 18 miles?
18 grueling miles, yes.
18 miles of dragging hundreds, if not thousands, of pounds of equipment, all their provisions, the canoes themselves, through completely unfamiliar and dangerous terrain.
Which required an immediate solution. And the ingenuity here is really something. The research shows they had to fell a massive cottonwood tree.
And the records are so specific. 22 inches in diameter.
Exactly. And they meticulously sawed these cross-sections from it 2 fashion wheels, heavy-duty wheels for these improvised wagons.
And in what has to be a masterclass in repurposing assets, they took the mast of the White Pirogue.
Their main command vessel up to this point.
The very same. They sacrificed it to become the axles for these crude wagons.
In that detail, it points to a much deeper strategic realization. They were abandoning the river, at least for now. They knew it. They were willing to dismantle their own essential equipment to survive this portage.
The ground itself was, an active enemy in this. As they were building the wagons, the men had to prepare for the prickly pear cactus.
Which was just everywhere.
It wasn't a minor annoyance, was it? The density of the thorns was so bad that the men were explicitly told to double-sole their moccasins.
It's a subtle detail, but it says so much. It speaks to the unrelenting wear and tear, not just on the gear, but on the men themselves. The environment was just designed to slow them down, to injure them at every single step.
And while the main party is focused on this engineering problem, Captain Lewis is overseeing the preparation of his pet project, the iron canoe frame.
Right, at the camp they call the White Bear Islands. This was Lewis's high-tech idea, something he thought could be built and deployed rapidly when they needed light vessels.
But during this whole period, the men were facing a much more visceral threat than cataracts or thorns.
The grizzly bears.
An unprecedented concentration of them.
The records from this time, they paint a picture of men who were just completely unprepared for the size and the sheer ferocity of these animals. They'd seen bears before, of course.
But not like this. The grizzlies around the falls were just relentless.
And the specific encounters are frankly shocking. York, a black member of the Corps, was chased directly into the camp. John Collins was driven into the river by a bear.
Joe Fields, too. He was also chased into the water, and he injured himself badly on the rocks and damaged his rifle in the process.
You have to think about the psychological impact of all this. I mean, you can't overstate it. These were seasoned frontiersmen. But the bears they were encountering were, they were like creatures from mythology.
So when Driard finally manages to kill one of these massive bears, the measurements they record in the journals, it almost feels like they're trying to rationalize their own fear.
I think that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
They note its nose was the size of an ox's, the front foot was 9 inches wide, and the hind foot nearly 12 inches long, and that's excluding the claws.
For men used to the smaller, less aggressive black bears of the East, this was just a different category of animal entirely.
Absolutely. Commanded total respect, and it fundamentally changed how they approached hunting and even just survival from that point on.
This constant threat, combined with the immense labor of the portage, it leads to this small but really significant moment of relief for the men.
The caching of the swivel cannon.
Which raises the question, why did they haul this heavy piece of ordnance nearly 2,000 miles, only to leave it behind right now?
Well, its initial purpose was twofold. It was for river defense and for high-stakes diplomacy with the powerful tribes on the lower Missouri.
A show of force.
Exactly. Its tactical value was in signaling dominance, serving as this imposing deterrent along that river highway. But now, moving overland, its use was negligible, and its weight was just a huge logistical burden that far outweighed any benefit. Caching it was a necessary admission that Their tactical needs had changed.
Every ounce counted.
Every single ounce.
But before that portage was even complete, the natural world delivered another blow. This one was spectacular and deeply personal, especially for Captain Clark.
A truly biblical flash flood and hailstorm.
And it started so simply. Sacagawea had become temporarily ill.
After eating some dried fish and a root called pomme blanc, or ground apples, Charbonneau and Peter were looking after her.
So Captain Clark, showing what seems like genuine care, decides to take Sacagawea and Charbonneau to see the Great Falls, maybe to lift their spirits.
He leaves Peter on guard duty. And this simple excursion just turns into a life-or-death situation. The weather shifted instantaneously.
A sudden, severe black cloud. It comes from the direction of the snow-covered mountains.
It brings this fierce wind, torrential rain, and then massive hailstones. The journals describe them as being the size of a man's fist.
The force of it must have been debilitating. The men who were returning for baggage had stripped to the waist because of the heat, and they were caught completely exposed.
Blinded and bleeding from the impact of the ice, they were forced to crawl frantically underneath the wagon for any kind of shelter.
We know Cruzette, George Gibson, John Potts, Nat Pryor. They were all knocked down by the force of it. It was a spectacle of natural violence few of them had ever seen.
But for Clark, Sacagawea, and Charbonneau, the danger was amplified by where they were.
They were in a ravine near the falls.
A classic tactical mistake. That ravine rapidly transformed into a death trap, filling with a rushing torrent of water and debris. A flash flood.
Clark and Charbonneau managed to help her climb to safety.
But crucially, Sacagawea, in all that chaos, saved little Toussaint. He was strapped to her back and she lost the net he was in, but she saved the child.
Charbonneau, though, he lost his gun, his bullet pouch, and his tomahawk. A catastrophic loss of essential survival gear.
Ironically, it was York, who was out hunting on the open plain, who fared the best. He just had to endure the hailstones.
And the immediate aftermath was severe. Willow Run Creek rose 6 feet, and it delayed the completion of that agonizing portage by 2 full days.
Every day spent there's a day closer to winter. And after all of this, the engineering, the bears, the flood, came what Lewis himself probably saw as one of his greatest failures.
The iron boat.
It was a monumental effort. Lewis had spent days with the men, covering the frame with elk and buffalo skins. They meticulously sealed the seams with this mixture of beeswax, tallow, and pounded charcoal. It was their best effort at waterproofing.
So what was the exact nature of the failure? Why did this high-tech solution ultimately fail?
The failure was total. It was catastrophic. Despite all that labor, the iron canoe leaked irreparably. The sealing compound just couldn't withstand the pressure and the flexing of the river current. The skins got saturated.
So the structure was sound, but the material science of the day just wasn't up to it.
Exactly. It was a complete disappointment. It really symbolized the failure of what they saw as advanced European engineering in this harsh environment. They had to take the boat apart and just bury the materials.
This meant Lewis's reliance on ingenuity failed, forcing him to rely on, well, more traditional methods. That shift is critical, isn't it?
Absolutely. It forced an immediate and decisive logistical shift. Captain Clark and most of the men had to abandon any idea of immediate progress and spend days just searching for large trees suitable for hollowing out new canoes.
So another serious delay.
A huge delay. The expedition couldn't proceed until mid-July, weeks behind schedule, and now they were entirely dependent on replicating the time-tested boat designs of the indigenous peoples. It had to be a humbling moment for the Corps.
So that failure forced them to trade high-tech ambition for low-tech, proven ingenuity. And that shift was immediately necessary as they left the Great Falls and began ascending the Missouri towards the mountains in these newly constructed canoes.
And despite the new vessels, the physical difficulty of river travel just escalated dramatically.
The Missouri was changing.
Fundamentally, the current got swifter, the river shallower. It turned the expedition into this arduous process of wading and hauling the boats against the flow. The men were in the water constantly, pulling against a stiff current in 80-degree weather sometimes. It was just constant grinding labor.
Their passage through what they called the Gate of the Mountains stands out as one of the most remarkable geographical features they encountered.
It was a transformative experience for sure. A channel only 150 paces wide, cutting directly through solid cliffs that soared 1,200 feet high.
Black granite at the base and creamy yellow stone above.
Right. And the water was too deep for poling, the current too fierce for wading. The men had to row inches at a time, using sheer strength to get through this canyon.
It must have been visually sublime, but physically terrifying.
Feeling trapped between those towering, unforgiving walls. And now, they knew they were deep within territory controlled by the Shoshone.
A horse-owning tribe whose aid was absolutely essential for crossing the Continental Divide.
Precisely, which meant the Corps had to shift from purely logistical concerns to acute diplomatic and security concerns. They needed to be very aware of their perceived intent.
So to avoid alarming the indigenous peoples, who might mistake gunfire for an invading party, the captains restricted all firing of guns.
And Sacagawea's role became increasingly vital. She started recognizing landmarks from her youth, which was a concrete sign they were nearing their objective,
They also raised small flags on the canoes.
to signal peaceful intentions to anyone who might be watching from the cliffs or the banks.
The emotional significance of this part of the journey really peaked on July 27th, 1805. The sheer cliffs finally ceased, and they reached this broadly rolling green meadow.
And the crew, who were exhausted but hopeful, they just erupted in cheers.
That meadow marked the monumental identification of the Three Forks of the Missouri.
Right, and Captain Lewis, adhering to the mission's goals, meticulously named them. Gallatin's River for the Secretary of the Treasury, Madison River for the Secretary of State.
And the Jefferson River, of course, for the president, which they determined was the main fork leading toward the source.
But for Sacagawea, this location was more than just geography. It held a profound and painful personal history.
She identified the confluence as the very spot where the Shoshone camp had been surprised by the Minnetarees 5 years earlier.
An attack that resulted in the capture of women and boys, including herself.
How did that realization affect the Corps?
For Sacagawea, it must have been an overwhelming mix of memory and trauma. But for the Corps, it was the final, undeniable proof that she was guiding them correctly. They were now standing on the very edge of the territory where they had to find horses.
And that knowledge gave Lewis the confidence to proceed with what was really the highest risk phase of the entire mission so far.
Finding the Shoshone.
So following this, Captain Lewis takes what is really decisive, even risky action. On August 9, he departs with Driard, Shields, and McNeil to scout ahead.
Right, to find the Shoshones and get those essential horses, instructing Captain Clark to just keep coming up the difficult Jefferson River.
This scouting mission was fraught with tension, though. It came very close to failure.
Hugh McNeil's account confirms that. The Shoshones were highly suspicious. They believed the Europeans might be military spies, despite all of Lewis's efforts to show peace. They were deep in enemy territory with no backup.
So what did they do to maintain trust, to prevent the whole mission from collapsing into a deadly misunderstanding?
Lewis employed these extreme acts of faith and vulnerability. He traded clothes with them. McNeil got a brown otter and ermine tippet for his hat. And critically, they gave over their guns.
Showing they trusted the indigenous peoples not to harm them.
A huge risk. They also prominently carried the U.S. flag. And when they failed to meet Captain Clark where they expected, Lewis had to act quickly. He scribbled a note by a brush fire and pretended it was a delay notice from Clark. He was lying effectively to convince the suspicious chief, Kamiah that his partner was indeed on the way.
The moment of truth, then, the climax of this whole diplomatic tightrope walk, happens on August 16th.
It does. As Captain Clark's party is rounding a difficult curve in the river, Sacagawea provides the final, undeniable proof of their peaceful intentions.
She runs ahead. The journals describe her as showing this immediate and overwhelming emotion.
Dancing and putting her fingers in her mouth, a traditional sign of seeing one's own kin. And then she recognizes the approaching Shoshone riders.
It's an astonishing, completely unplanned diplomatic coup.
It is. She first rushes to hug a woman who had been captured at the same time as her, but had managed to escape years ago. And then, moments later, she recognizes the chief, Kamiah, as her own brother.
So the entire fate of the expedition, the successful crossing of the continent, it all hinged on this chance encounter where she recognizes a childhood friend and then her long-lost brother.
Their position was existentially fragile before that moment. Had she not been there, or had the Shoshones been just a little more wary, Lewis and his small group would likely have been killed.
And the expedition would have been stranded, no horses, no guides, facing starvation in the mountains.
The reunion just immediately dissolved all that suspicion. It confirmed their peaceful intent, and it secured the expedition's destiny, leading directly into the negotiations for passage.
The initial result of that reunion was, of course, a successful negotiation. Chief Kamiah promised to furnish the horses they needed.
But the bargaining was tough. It reflected the high value the Shoshones placed on their animals. The cultural exchange during this period is also notable. The captains adopted certain customs, like wearing little Pacific Ocean shells in their hair.
Shells the Shoshones had purchased from other tribes.
Right, which indicates these vast trading networks that already span the continent. But when it came to the horses, The Shoshones were shrewd.
What was the escalation in price?
The initial price was just $6 each in trade goods, but that quickly rose to a full pistol, 100 balls, powder, and knife for a single young horse. It shows how acutely necessary European firearms and metal tools were to them.
Logistically, the preparation for the crossing was intense. They sunk the canoes in the river by filling them with rocks, hoping to retrieve them later.
Baggage was cached securely, and then the men had to construct these robust pack saddles, improvising them from oar handles and box pieces, all tied together with rawhide.
And the journals record perhaps the most poignant human decision of this phase, Sacagawea's choice.
Despite having found her brother and her people, and knowing that most of her immediate family was gone, she chose to continue with the Corps.
She expressed a deep desire to see the Pacific Ocean, the big waters she had traveled so far to reach.
It speaks to her immense loyalty and commitment to the mission's completion.
And so they move into the mountain crossing itself, a region they would quickly nickname the Starvation Mountains. It immediately presented staggering difficulties.
The journey north through what's now the Bitterroot Valley was grueling. The horses wore out quickly on the sharp rocks, and they were dealing with persistent rain and snow.
The men who had previously complained about the river now found themselves nostalgic for it.
Realizing the mountain journey was exponentially harder.
They soon encountered the Uthlashoots, or the Flathead Nation.
Who the records describe as a kind and hospitable people. They were rich in horses and generous with roots and berries. They gifted the captains handsome bleached buffalo robes because they genuinely believed the Europeans had been robbed, seeing how ragged they were.
But communication was a major challenge.
Immense. Charbonneau and Sacagawea struggled to interpret the Flatheads' language, which the journals describe as a curious mixture of grunts and cries,
highlighting how rapidly the linguistic landscape was shifting.
Despite that barrier, they secured a new guide, an indigenous man named Old Toby, who agreed to guide them onto the Perce Nose, or Nez Perce, trail.
They made a crucial stop at a river they named Traveler's Rest Creek,
where they paused to hunt and mend clothes before tackling the main mountain range. And this stop was a critical geographical confirmation. They confirmed that salmon were absent east of the Rocky Mountains.
The subsequent trek across the Bitterroot Mountains on that trail became the central physical ordeal of the entire expedition.
It justly earned the name Starvation Mountains. The challenge was immense. Once on the Idaho side, the path was confused by deep snow and thick timber. Old Toby struggled to maintain their route,
which led to a severe and demoralizing food crisis.
Game became virtually non-existent. The diet devolved to canned soup, berries, and eventually they had to start consuming their pack animals. The journal notes the first colt was killed on September 14th.
A grim moment.
The emotional toll was profound. The men were weak, ill from the poor diet, complaining about the cold, the rugged terrain. They were at their breaking point.
This hardship even led to the naming of the Kuskuski River,
a name born of frustration. Lewis asked Old Toby if this was the big river to the Pacific, and Toby replied, Kuskuski, which Charbonneau translated as, "This is not the river, it is some other river."
Captain Clark's leadership during this crisis was decisive.
Life-saving. He took the strongest hunters and rode ahead to find level ground and game. And in a moment of high drama, he left a note pinned to a horse carcass for the main party to find and consume,
just to ensure they had the calories to continue.
Following Clark's departure, Lewis's main party faced another setback. The loss of Lewis's pack animal carrying his critical saddlebags, his journals, medical supplies.
And this is where young Peter Weiser, the mixed-race boy, really steps up.
He does. Described as wiry and light-stepped, he volunteered to go with Reuben Fields on the recovery mission. He was hardened by his time with the Otos and clearly felt equal to the challenge.
Their journey back just highlights the severity of the hunger. They found the horse's head that Clark's party had left.
And they roasted it. They ate everything, including the ears, which the journals note specifically. It conveys this sheer desperation.
Even after finding the saddlebags, their struggle continued. They lost the horses again. Reuben Fields managed to shoot 2 grouse.
But the impact of the ball left the small birds so pulped that they yielded barely a couple of mouthfuls.
Their arrival was triumphant and timely. They finally located Captain Clark and the main party on the Camas Prairie, literally saved just as they reached their physical limit.
They had been supplied with fish and roots by the friendly Nez Perces, led by Chief Twisted Hair.
This transition marks the shift from that agonizing mountain ordeal to the final rapid push downriver to the sea.
Right. And the Nez Perces, a horse-rich, generous nation, provided the respite the Corps needed to reconstitute and prepare.
The first priority was preparing a fleet again. 5 new canoes were constructed, hollowed out by fire from tree trunks.
And crucially, all 43 of their horses were branded with Captain M. Lewis, U.S., and left in the care of the Nez Perces, an act of profound trust.
The diet during this period became a point of significant intercultural tension, though.
It did. The expedition, still needing protein, was forced to buy and consume the Nez Perces work dogs. The Nez Perces looked down on them as dog eaters, viewing it as highly distasteful.
And their guide's departure was abrupt. Old Toby and his son suddenly fled,
Reportedly afraid of the rapids below and worried their pay would be stolen. This left the Corps to navigate the treacherous rapids alone.
On October 16th, they reached the junction with the massive Columbia River, a moment for celebration.
Definitely. The Columbia was 960 yards wide, confirming they were now on the Great Water Highway to the sea.
Navigation remained a huge challenge, even downstream. They ran several difficult rapids, including the Long Narrows.
A feat of expert watermanship, guided successfully by Cruzat, the head boatman.
As they proceeded, they began seeing concrete signs of the Pacific Trade Network.
Articles of European manufacture, confirming contact with ocean-going vessels. And then, on November 4, they measured a 4-foot rise in the water level. They had officially reached the tidewater.
This set the stage for the final push. On November 7, amid a dense mist, the crew of the captain's boat sighted a vast expanse of tumbling gray water and heard the muffled boom of surf.
They had reached the Pacific Ocean, but the celebration was delayed by miserable weather. Wind and rain kept them pinned down for days.
The atmosphere was grim. Sacagawea believed the spirits were angry.
They finally rounded a point and selected a site 10 miles inland up what is now the Lewis and Clark River, a spot that offered essential resources for the winter ahead.
And this brought the Corps to their winter at Fort Clatsop from December 1805 to March 1806, a period for resupply and preparation for the return.
Fort Clatsop was erected rapidly out of necessity. Pat Gass, the carpenter, noted the local pine was exceptional for building, allowing for dry, snug construction despite the relentless coastal dampness.
Their first Christmas on the Pacific really was a testament to their depleted state.
A volley of gunfire, a song, and a sparse meal of roots, pounded fish, and lean elk meat. A true feast was impossible.
Sustenance demanded specialized, grueling work. A crew was sent to the seashore to establish a salt-making operation.
They spent the winter boiling down salt water and eventually returned with a gallon of vital salt, essential for curing meat and maintaining health.
And the hunting statistics are incredible, 131 elk and 20 deer over the course of the season.
And from those hides, the men manufactured 338 pairs of moccasins, desperately preparing their footwear for the long journey home.
Their interaction with the coastal tribes, the Clatsops, Chinooks, Tillamook's, and Cathlamettes, defined that winter. The records describe these people in terms of their adaptation to a canoe-based lifestyle.
Small, flat-footed, and crooked-legged from spending so much time in their boats.
And trade proved to be exceptionally difficult.
Because the coastal indigenous peoples were highly sophisticated traders. They'd already dealt extensively with sailing ships. They demanded essential metal items, fish hooks, knives, files.
Sea otter robes were particularly prized, available only in exchange for rare blue chief beads.
Which highlights Sacagawea's personal sacrifice. When Captain Clark couldn't buy a robe, Sacagawea gave him her own personal girdle of those blue beads to make the trade.
An item that represented immense personal wealth to her.
And the dynamics were dangerous. The Chinooks were thievish, the Cathlamettes treacherous. The captains had to establish strict rules, essentially turning the camp into a fortified position.
They also adapted to new foods. Shana tahi, a roasted thistle root.
And Wapatu, a woolly bulb that Pat Gass called a rail Irish potato.
The famous whale event occurred in January 1806. Chief Kobowe reported a whale had stranded nearby.
The men were intensely interested. They tasted the blubber and deemed it excellent. Captain Clark immediately organized a party.
But Sacagawea's reaction to potentially being excluded is one of the most powerful moments in the journals.
It is. Fearing she...
As winter ended, departure preparations began in March 1806. The logistics were intricate, dictated by their scarcity of trade goods.
So much so that Lewis had to resort to a drastic measure. Drouillard successfully traded Captain Lewis's laced dress uniform coat.
His most valuable possession.
His only one. Traded for a crucial fifth canoe. It underscores the complete shift in value from military status to sheer utility.
They also took pains to preserve their legacy, understanding they might not survive the return trip.
They carved their names into trees and wrote detailed statements describing their route, giving copies to the indigenous peoples to pass to white traders. It was an insurance policy.
On March 23, 1806, Fort Clatsop was abandoned. Chief Sacagawea was given the fort, and the party departed, confident they would beat the news of their success back home.
The return trip up the Columbia was immediately fraught with renewed tensions. New tribes gathering for the spring salmon run were often unfriendly. The Walla threw stones and stole items.
The valuable little black Assiniboine dog was stolen by the Waklalas,
but recovered by Sergeant Pryor, Drouillard, and McNeil, who made it clear they were willing to shoot the thieves if necessary.
Essential trade continued. They purchased 10 horses from the Skilloots using their remaining goods. They desperately needed them to circumvent the rapids and carry William Bratton, who was too ill to walk.
They eventually arrived at the Walla village, where Chief Yellopt provided immense hospitality, gifting Captain Clark a noble white horse in exchange for the captain's prized sword and ammunition.
And Clark's reputation as a physician preceded him.
Thanks to Sacagawea, he traded his medical services for dogs and roots, which proved a more effective currency than their scarce goods.
Returning to the Nez Perce's country, they faced initial alarm. Sacagawea reported rumors that their cached horses and saddles were lost due to quarrels between chiefs Twisted Hair and Cut Nose.
Lewis had to act as a diplomat again, brokering peace. They recovered 21 of the 43 horses.
But then Chief Broken Arm, or Black Eagle, intervened with immense generosity, offering the expedition horses for food.
And a notable medical success occurred here. William Bratton was cured of his illness through an indigenous sweat lodge treatment after Clark's own remedies had failed.
They confirmed Old Toby had, in fact, stolen 2 horses, and with 65 horses now secured, John Shields, the blacksmith, began fabricating awls from beaver trap links to use as trade goods.
Despite this recovery, the Nez Perce chiefs insisted the snow was still too deep for the mountain crossing, but the captains chose to proceed anyway.
An impatience that proved costly.
The initial attempt failed decisively. The snow was 15 feet deep, forcing them to turn back. They had to hire guides. Drouillard and Shannon were sent back offering 2 guns, and they returned with 3 young warriors.
And these guides were essential and highly efficient. They never missed the Nez Perce road to the buffalo.
The expedition reached Travelers Rest Creek by June 30, and here, the Corps was officially divided for expanded exploration. It was a critical strategic move to maximize geographical intelligence.
Captain Clark's party was tasked with recovering the sunk canoes. Half would then descend the Missouri, while the other half, led by Clark and Sacagawea, would cross east to explore the Yellowstone River.
And Captain Lewis's party, including the Field brothers, Drouillard and Peter Weiser, was assigned the more dangerous northern route to strike the Marias River and explore its length.
This brings us to the conflict and casualty on the Marias River. Lewis's smaller party reached the Great Falls in just 9 days.
And Lewis's command to Sergeant Pat Gass here was remarkably stark. He told Pat that if he did not arrive by August 5, Pat was to wait until September 1st and then inform Captain Clark that Lewis and his party had been destroyed.
He was planning for his own potential death.
Absolutely. Then, on July 26, Lewis, Drouillard, and the Fields brothers encountered 8 indigenous warriors. They were confirmed to be the hostile Gros-Enters of the prairie, the Blackfeet.
Outnumbered and with tired horses, they were forced into this tense coexistence, camping overnight with them.
The confrontation erupted at sunrise over their weapons. A warrior tried to steal the Fields' guns. Reuben reacted instantly, stabbing the man with his knife.
And the violence escalated rapidly. Lewis chased another warrior who was taking his horse. When the man refused to surrender it, Lewis fired his pistol, killing him. The dying warrior returned fire, sending a ball right through the captain's hair.
A near-fatal injury. Fearing the arrival of the main band, Lewis and his men fled, riding an astonishing 120 miles in under 24 hours to meet Ordway's canoes.
Lewis understood immediately that this would turn all Europeans into enemies of this powerful tribe.
The reunion with Ordway's group was brief. They immediately proceeded downriver, still fearing a Blackfeet attack. They found Clark's note at the Yellowstone Junction, indicating he was ahead. But on August 11th, Lewis suffered another grievous injury.
He and Cruzat went ashore to hunt elk.
And in the thicket, Cruzat, who had poor vision, mistook Lewis's leather breeches for elk fur. He shot him through the left thigh.
The confusion was profound. Lewis thought he'd been ambushed by the Blackfeet. He organized a rescue party led by Pat Gass.
And Pat found Cruzat, oblivious, proud of having killed an elk, and angrily accused him of nearly committing murder.
Fortunately, the injury wasn't mortal, but Lewis was immobilized and immediately handed command over to Captain Clark.
Which brings us to the final stage, the Missouri Dash and the triumphant return.
The reunited Corps met the first Americans they had seen in over a year, trappers who confirmed the barge had reached St. Louis safely the previous year.
Clark reported on his successful Yellowstone exploration, praising Sacagawea's guidance. His party had lost all their remaining horses and had to build buffalo hide canoes. Sergeant Pryor had also been bitten by a wolf while sleeping.
They arrived at the Mandan villages on August 14, firing the blunderbuss cannon.
And here, Captain Clark successfully persuaded Chief Big White to travel to Washington, promising protection despite the ongoing war with the Sioux.
This led to the significant farewells. Charbonneau and Sacagawea decided to stay, with Charbonneau receiving $500 in wages.
And Lewis and Clark offered a powerful tribute to Sacagawea, recognizing her invaluable contributions.
John Colter also made a crucial choice, receiving permission to return upriver with the trappers to hunt beaver. This really marks the beginning of the American fur trade in the region.
The party then set out, their canoes lashed together for speed, carrying Chief Big White and his family.
But the final stages down the Missouri still presented danger. They learned the Sioux were mobilizing 700 warriors against the Mandans, a fact they kept from Chief Big White.
Near the James River, they encountered 20 Teton Sioux, including Chief Black Buffalo. Clark, remembering past hostilities, refused a council and ordered the boats to proceed, preparing for an attack.
They later met friendly Yankton Sioux who were maintaining the peace.
And they passed familiar ground, stopping at Sergeant Floyd's disturbed grave, which they ordered filled again. They camped at the old Omaha village, where Peter had first joined them.
And when Clark asked Peter if he wished to return to the Otaws, Peter insisted he wanted to go to St. Louis.
They continued to meet traders, who informed them the U.S. government had given them up for lost.
On August 20, the sight of domesticated cows signaled the proximity of settlements. Pat Gass expressed profound relief, calling the cow the buffalo civilized.
They were treated as heroes in the first French villages of La Charrette and St. Charles.
The final 17 miles were rowed swiftly. On September 23, 1806, they met a large camp of U.S. soldiers just outside St. Louis. They arrived at the city landing, firing a triumphant volley.
They were instantly mobbed by the citizens of St. Louis who had thought them dead. The report confirmed the successful crossing of the continent, a journey of over 8,000 miles, with only one fatality by disease.
The men were to be paid, discharged, and rewarded with 320 acres of land. The Corps proved the continent was traversable, but their journey cost them 8,000 miles of blood and sweat. And yet, look at that final departure. John Colter immediately turns around to go back into the wild. Was the true achievement of this expedition not finding the Pacific, but discovering a type of American restless spirit that couldn't possibly return home? That's something to think about. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning something new. That's all for now, but in case you didn't notice, there are a lot more episodes on this subject available on this channel. If you're enjoying these historical podcasts, please like and subscribe and share with other history buffs. While this is an AI recording, the research that has gone into this production is comprehensive and focuses on very specific moments in history, designed to bring as much detail to the listener as possible. Thanks again for listening in.